hate speech laws in Venezuela are being used to target Maduro's foes, remaining foes, in fact, which should come as no great surprise, really, because obviously Maduro, being deeply endorsed by a kind old gent called Jeremy Corbyn, just all of these endorsements age really, really badly when it comes to socialists, and it always has, right? Even go back to like the Soviet Union. Stalin was the golden boy of the Western left until it turned out actually he's killed tens of millions of people. Yikes! Actually, we're with Trotsky, you know, like it's
like that's any better.
Yeah, like that's any better. Yeah, but the point is, all these socialist endorsements always age really badly because it turns out that socialists are a bunch of tyrants, and there's simply just too much proof to deny it. But anyway, this is Francisco Belisario, a Venezuelan mayor and a retired general and member of the ruling Socialist Party, had had enough. His loudest local critic had accused him of bungling the response to the coronavirus outbreak, among other big problems. So in August, he wrote a state prosecutor and requested an exhaustive investigation into his nemesis, Giovanni Urbaneja, a former lawmaker who had become a gadfly to the mayor and other socialist office holders. Urbaneja, Belisario wrote, in a letter reviewed by Reuters, was conducting a ferocious smear campaign on Facebook and elsewhere. And you can't have ferocious smear campaigns in a one-party state. And if you're going to build a one-party state, you've got to get rid of that opposition. He defamed him and President Nicolas Maduro, the mayor wrote. He violated Venezuela's law against hate. And this, I just want to say, we were right. As always, the problem with these kinds of laws that are based on subjective criteria that can just be enforced at will is the people who are defining what hate becomes who are the people who end up tyrannizing you. The law was passed in 2017, but rarely used before this year, but it criminalizes actions that, quote, incite hatred against a person or a group. And if that person happens to be the dictator, you're in for it. You're done. You're in trouble. That's hate speech. Criticizing the dear leader is hate speech. Full circle.
But where's the lie? By their own standards, that is what is going on.
Yes, the ultimate persecuted minority. The dictator of the country. I mean, like, come on, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, but this is something you and Dankula have been saying for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I've seen people fobbing off, being like, "Oh yeah, how are we going to use laws that protect black people from people saying the N-word or something?"
You literally have it here.
Like, yeah, there you go. Now what?
The most powerful individual in the country is now the most oppressed minority in the country through the use of hate speech laws. It's totally backwards. But anyway, charge Urbaneja with hate crimes, the mayor implored the prosecutor. And then days later, several dozen masked officers raided Urbaneja's home and took him at gunpoint for a chat. According to the police report of his arrest and his wife, he remains jailed awaiting formal charges and a trial. So who knows how long he's going to be in jail for? He's just stuck there now.
Indefinitely.
Yeah. I mean, at least in Britain, when Dankula was arrested, they at least took him to a police station and charged him with something. I suppose we've got that. That's a slight...
And he was put in there with serious criminals. Like, some guy had violated his bail charges, some guy had a knife at someone, and then they took to him, and what are you in for? It's like, made a meme.
Made a joke on the internet.
So it's like, this guy, he'll be in there with people who have been rioting against Maduro and, drug runners. Yeah. It's like, what did you do?
Murderers, all this sort of stuff. Yeah,
Said he was bad at handling coronavirus.
The interesting thing about it as well is that the hate speech law is deemed unconstitutional and illegitimate by many Venezuelan scholars, legal scholars that Reuters consulted. And not only does the law violate free expression, like anyone cares about that, it was also illegally enacted, drafted and rubber stamped by a parallel legislature that Maduro had created at the time to circumvent the opposition-controlled assembly. For anyone who doesn't know, this has been a long-running thing going on in Venezuela. But yeah, it's exactly as they described. Maduro basically created his own legislature and was just like, to hell with you.
Those scholars sound like hate figures to me.
Oh, I think they'd probably better be careful, to be honest. I mean, they probably don't spend too much time criticizing Maduro because they don't want to oppress a minority, do they? But that's the argument. The moral basis of the idea of a hate speech law is that a majority is going to oppress a minority, and so the majority of people that I'm tyrannizing are oppressing me with all of this oppressive criticism. How dare they?
Well, if 2 million people are criticizing you,
that's rough. I'm just a guy with an army.
Speech is violence.
Yeah, and secret police. And the ability to arbitrarily enact whatever laws I like.
Yeah, but if speech is violence, they're engaging in violence against you. You ought to engage in violence back.
This was just an attack on the dear leader. The people understand that these dissidents need to be persecuted. Which incidentally is what's been happening. So Reuters say the law has played an important role in the nationwide election this month, Maduro's opponents say, by cowing critics who had spoken out against the government in the run-up to the vote. You may remember that, obviously, Dominion voting systems have been... Smartmatic voting systems were created by Chavez and the Venezuelan government in order to rig these elections in Venezuela, which I believe I'm allowed to say about a foreign country, just not about the United States.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah, isn't it weird, right? And so... Naturally, the election is widely considered a sham by the opposition. No kidding. By the opposition, human rights groups, and most Western democracies.
I don't know if you mentioned it. I think I might have glossed over that the 48 people.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think it says that, I can't get the text specifically, but it was 40 people have also been charged with hate crimes. This is just Reuters looking into them.
This is an increasingly common maneuver in a review of more than 40 recent hate speech law arrests. Reuters found that in each case, authorities had intervened against Venezuelans who had criticized Maduro or other ruling party officials.
Yeah.
So it's only being used for political reasons. And the thing is, you might say, well, okay, in a corrupt socialist country like Venezuela, maybe that's the case. But our hate speech laws are not going to be used like that. It's like, okay.
They've already been used like that.
That doesn't matter, right? The very
realities of no concern.
Yeah, it is not. It is not. If we've learned anything from socialism, it's that reality is what the problem is. We have defined the solution, and we just need to find a way of getting there. But the problem is that implicit in the very notion of a hate speech law is a partisan political bias. Because if you are a liberal and you don't believe that there can be such thing as hate speech laws, and you are now subject to hate speech laws, that is a partisan political bias against you. This is why Tim Pool was able to make such a... And it's the same thing with like misgendering on Twitter. When Tim Pool was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he's like, well, look, you can't misgender people on Twitter. That's a partisan political issue. And it's the same with hate speech laws. Should you be able to criminalize people for the things they say in social settings? Well, probably not. Unless you're a communist and you believe that you should have a domineering administrative state that does all of this anyway.
So I did a lot of reading about censorship, and there in a liberal system, there are a lot of arguments for when censorship is valid, and it is. I mean... Child
porn, terrorist threats,
yep,
sure.
There's
there
loads
are
of things.
There are
but
things.
The interesting thing is the argument's always based on tangible harm, whereas if the argument is based on harmony, which is what misgendering is, it's what the thing with Count Dankula was, it's what this is, it's always a political action.
We need harmony so people don't upset the equilibrium of society under the dear leader.
But if anyone ever makes an argument, this is the problem with political correctness. That it's parading as manners. Is that no? It is if it's based on the fact that this will bring harmony to the nation or society or whatever, reject it. Reject it outright.
Yeah, because it's literally going to bring oppression. But yeah. So this has played an important role in this election that's considered sham. And again, like every socialist regime, in fact, every dictatorial regime always goes through the same phases. So like now you have a special secret police force that is suppressing dissent in poor neighborhoods. Many of these who used to be convicted criminals themselves, but have conducted lethal raids to intimidate citizens. To appease the enfeebled security forces, police and troops are often allowed to loot, extort, and commit violent crimes. So it's basically Maduro's black shirts are being employed as a kind of, oppressive police force to make sure that people don't speak out against Maduro. Look, we're trying to save you from the crime of hate speech, okay? To preserve harmony, we're going to loot, extort, and beat you.
I mean, they're only doing it to these obvious racists, so...
that's a good point. Like, socialist phobes have been severely cracked down on in Venezuela, and, who knows why they're against socialism. Must be all of the pets that they had to eat or something, But targets, what I love about this as well, because Venezuela is, a less developed country, it's not like the high-tech sort of social credit system where, like in China where you've got like facial recognition or anything like that. No. They're tracked in the old-fashioned way by paying loyalists to rat out their neighbours. It's like traditional, good old-fashioned socialism. It's the
little
working man's socialism.
I'm getting the feeling of pottery shards off of you about that.
Slightly, yeah. Exactly. We're not. It could have been that we got the wrong person, but if we can pay one of their family members to dob them in, then we know we've got the right person. See, it's guarantees.
That doesn't work. I'm just gonna lie.
Well, no,
yeah, my brother, he's a socialist phobe. You need to get him.
Maybe, but the hate legislation is proving to be an effective weapon against critics, not least because of harsh penalties for those convicted. It provides a prison term for up to 20 years, assuming you even get your trial.
Sorry, that's the hate speech.
Yeah, the hate speech law, prison terms of up to 20 years, longer than an 18-year sentence for murder convictions. If you killed the dear leader, you would serve less time in jail than if you criticised the dear leader.